My name is Ben Glickman. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the state of California. Much more importantly, I'm an alumnus of We the People and was lucky enough to be on a national championship team way back in 1995. And I've been involved pretty much ever since then. And you can see we're in the House Intelligence Committee room today. So welcome to Capitol Hill.
My name is Candida Steel, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I handled federal government contract disputes and traveled around the country doing that. I live in Annapolis, and I've been with the program for about 20 years.
You're muted.
You're muted.
I'm Marcia Holland, now unmuted. I'm in Missoula, Montana. I was a career public defender in Alaska, but upon moving to Montana, I started teaching at the law school here. And I have been involved with We the People, both in Alaska and Montana for more years than you've been here. So thank you for letting us participate with you today. We really appreciate it.
If you could introduce yourselves and your teacher or teachers, that would be great.
I'm Evelyn Napier, and our teacher is Mark Dickman.
I'm alyssatouhalisky.
And I'm Tyler Bihn.
Great. And it should come as no surprise what question it will be, but I will read it for the sake of the video. Number 3. In 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? Whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, 100 years after the ratification of the 19th Amendment and with the ERA being ratified by the 38th state, leading to a debate over its constitutionality, it is important to compare the two amendments in that while both amendments focus on gender equality, the 19th Amendment focuses specifically on women's suffrage, while the ERA addresses the equality of both genders in the workplace. After the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the women's movement saw each generation fighting for women's rights. While the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1919 was a great achievement for women, it focused solely on women's suffrage, and while it was a major step for women's rights, it did little to address issues other than voting. However, the Equal Rights Amendment of 1972 would provide for gender equality by addressing issues including paid paternity and maternity leave for new parents. It would also help break discriminatory practices such as the mommy track and the glass ceiling effect that women often struggle to break until the election of 2018, as the political glass ceiling began to shatter as 117 women were elected to Congress. In addition, the ERA would also create a focus on gender-based violence by providing an impetuous for enforcement and reform for gender-based violence laws that are often overlooked and misapplied.
Mr. Chairman, while the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, it was just a first step toward equality that began in 1848 and continues to this day. Since the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, the women's suffrage movement desired more than the right to vote, as seen with the Declaration of Sentiments, which contained 18 demands for women's rights, which focus on gender discrimination in areas including the state, the family, the workplace, and the church. After gaining the right to vote in 1920, women still face systematic issues on gender equality, such as serving on juries, working outside the home, pursuing higher education, and owning property without a husband. These inequalities led to the demand for an Equal Right Amendment in 1923, based on the equal protection of laws similar to Equal Rights Amendments, eventually passed by 11 states, and a call for gender equality in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Many issues people view as solved today were not addressed until 1960s and the 1970s, and the second attempt at the Equal Rights Amendment. While voting rights for women didn't solve many issues, it was a crucial step because without it, women would have no standing to challenge lawmakers and to address issues that have led to the improvements in women's lives in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Mr. Chairman, currently 31 states have passed an Equal Rights Amendment to their state constitutions to protect against discrimination based on gender, which has enabled them to tailor their amendments to their specific circumstances. However, this has created differences from state to state and less protection than a national ERA. While 31 states ranging in size from Wyoming to California and every region of the nation have created their own version of the Equal Rights Amendment, they follow two basic approaches. The first approach, used in states such as Pennsylvania, Colorado, Washington, Maryland, and Massachusetts, is very similar to the proposed federal Equal Rights Amendment by providing a strict standard against the use of gender to make illegal distinctions in areas including divorce, property, and employment. The second approach, used in states such as Rhode Island, Virginia, Florida, and Utah, more closely resembles the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment by focusing on equality under the law and equal protection for all people. However, this approach only applies to actions taken by the state governments and therefore provides little or no protection against discriminatory actions against private interest. While states do derive some benefits from having their own ERA, a national equal rights amendment would create more uniformity and protect individuals against both state and private interest.
Thank you. I think Canada.
There we go. So I'll ask first question. Virginia became the 38th state to pass the ERA in January of 2020. Do you think the archivist should just register the new amendment and declare it ratified?
I think that because it has passed its deadline, it makes complete sense to have debate over it, as it may be, parts of it may be perhaps outdated and may need updated. So I think it's better to debate its constitutionality as it is significantly past its deadline.
Any other opinions?
I agree with my colleague in the sense that since the deadline ended in 1982, it needs to be, there have been discussions that it could be unconstitutional to just pass it because other states have dropped from the original 38. So I believe that it does need to be discussed.
So what would you do instead then? Sorry, Marcia.
Yes,
go ahead.
Instead of passing it right now?
Yeah.
Well, I would, like my colleague said, I would discuss the things that need to be possibly changed from what was discussed in the early, like in the 70s and 80s. So I believe that certain things could be changed to affect things like transgender and non-binary things now, because those could have come into play with the certain aspects of the amendment.
It would
Thank
be.
you. I'm sorry.
It would be best to update, or not update it, but perhaps take a look at it and see maybe why it took so long to truly get 38 states to ratify it. And perhaps we need to change parts of it, or perhaps get a whole new one altogether that's more accurate in terms of what we need it for.
Well, that leads into my question. In the 70s, there was strong pushback from groups of women, including STOP, which was probably the most organized. What were their concerns about the either the language or just the impact that the ERA would have? And looking at those issues through the lens of now it's 2020, are those concerns still legitimate or not?
Some of their concerns were potential reproductive rights that would come along with this, as we do have a very strong a pro-life and a pro-choice groups of people. So one of their arguments was that it would perhaps further along the reproductive rights that women have now. I personally don't see this as a concern, as the ERA does not directly mention abortion at all in it. People are suggesting that the language within it would allow, because we can see in New Mexico that they were able to use the language in their ERA to get rid of some of the restrictive abortion laws they were trying to pass. And they also brought up the fact that women would have to be in the draft, which isn't directly mentioned in the ERA either. So two of their concerns aren't even technically in the ERA that's proposed. They were used more as a propaganda tactic.
Thanks.
You touched on this a bit, but why do we need the ERA at all? Why isn't the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, why isn't that enough?
It doesn't address gender in it. It doesn't directly state female, male. So I think that we can see that we still need something that addresses directly the female, male.
And it says persons, that's not enough?
I don't think it's enough personally. I think that we still do need the ERA, as Things as such as the mommy track are still used very much, and there are still some injustices that just I think the ERA would fix better.
You're muted again.
Sorry. Does Joe Biden's promise to choose a woman as his vice presidential running mate violate the spirit of the Equal Rights Amendment, or does it support the spirit of the Equal Rights Amendment?
I believe that it helps to push for that, but I feel like it could be taken as a ploy just to get votes personally. But it's a good step to help break that glass ceiling that my colleague spoke about in her answer statement, that to get more women in offices and things like that. So it can help to push for that.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague. I think it's a good step, but you have to be careful that you're not just giving a woman the spot, even if their credentials, someone better just would be better, even if their credentials were better. And so we have to be sure that we are if we give a woman a spot of higher position, that they're really right for it, and it's not just because we're trying to break the glass ceiling. I think that should be taken into effect as well.
And I'm going to try to ask a quick question. Given that we have the 14th Amendment, but we started out with Plessy versus Ferguson and ended up with Brown versus Board of Education, even if the ERA passed next month, what issues do you think will still end up being litigated, perhaps all the way to the Supreme Court?
I think issues regarding transgender and non-binary will eventually go to court due to the fact that we don't directly address what we would do with someone that perhaps goes by a they, them pronoun. And I can see that causing conflict within our Equal Rights Amendment because these new pronouns are so new that they haven't been fitted in yet. And so I can see the issues that would arise with that.
Anyone else have any other thoughts?
I'd have to agree with my colleague on that one.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'll begin with some feedback. I really I teach a trial practice class, and one of the concepts is have a good theme to your arguments and your whole case. And you started out with a really good one. This has been a generational fight for a long time. And it started out a long time ago. And now we're seeing it in areas such as the glass ceiling and the mommy track. So I really appreciate that you were very thoughtful about how you wanted to just make us as judges understand that this issue's been around for a long time. I thought when you got down to specifics about the areas not covered by the 19th Amendment, you had a really good list of the things that just aren't covered. And that is really important because that helps segue into answering the other part of the question as to why the Equal Rights Amendment is necessary. I really liked your approaches, describing the two approaches by states who have looked at the Equal Rights Amendment for their state constitution, have come up with, they're still not in agreement about that. And finally, I was thinking, the only interesting thing, because you're talking about reproductive rights, is because, Roe v. Wade was just getting started to be decided. So, back then when the Stop movement was around, there wasn't a Roe v. Wade yet. So the issue was even more complicated because there hadn't been any kind of decision. But other than that, great job. I so appreciated everything you've done.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought the prepared remarks did a good job of answering the question. Might have liked to hear a little bit more about the worldwide impact, if any, of the 19th Amendment. But that said, you guys answered the question and had some good examples. I would echo, I really liked the notion of walking us through the different approaches that different states have taken to crafting their own amendments. I thought that was an effective way to talk about that. On my question about the 14th Amendment, is it enough? I think you gave a good answer. I would have loved to hear a little bit more. And you mentioned one thing in your presentation, how it only applies to states, right? That's a big limitation of the 14th Amendment. And so I might have liked to hear a little bit more there, but it was clear that you guys had thought about these issues and talked about them amongst yourselves. And I really do commend you for continuing on in your studies and these kind of crazy times. So it's been a privilege. Great.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Thank you very much. I agree completely with both my colleagues. I especially appreciated the state ERA discussion, and I was glad to hear a listing of which ones went which way, because I confess I haven't looked up 50 states or 25 states to see what their ERAs were. So thank you for the education. So you've all had quite an education yourselves, I expect. I hope you've really enjoyed doing this, because we need you to have learned all of this. And I know it's going to have made absolutely wonderful citizens out of you, and you're going to all go vote, and you're going to talk to all your families and friends and drag them there, and read the papers and look at the news. But I think you're qualified to do more than that. You know more about the Constitution than my constitutional law class knew, probably. And we need you to use that education now to represent the rest of us, whether it's by being a lawyer or a judge, or whether you'd like to be a local or a state or a federal representative or senator. We need you to represent us. And so I'm really pleased to see how well you've absorbed all of this. And I have to say, I'll be feeling a whole lot better rocking in my rocking chair in the nursing home, knowing that your generation is well prepared to take care of us all. Thank you. You really did a lovely job. I'll sleep well tonight.
And thanks to your family and your teachers and everyone who supported you. We really enjoyed seeing you today.
Absolutely. Thank you.